We will be looking at, a lot of cases that have been recorded so far. We've had so many records, and it's scary because we see that other African countries have to now take precautionary measures to put in place to avoid these things entering into the country. And I see that different governments are now at alert to avoid this because, of course, the COVID-19 taught a lot of lessons, and we're hoping that the same thing doesn't happen in African countries. But we will also be looking at hospitality industry in Africa as well, Nigeria. The hospitality industry is responsible for 313 million jobs worldwide, which accounts for 9.9% of total employment, according to World Travel and Tourism Council. Again, this remarkably high percentage means that the hospitality industry is important to a huge number of persons. These jobs are also important for the economic growth of any country. They provide career opportunities for people who work in the hospitality industry.
Now, recently, the hospitality industry in Africa has faced tough times since the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, which has led to mass layoffs and changes in management, pay cuts, and so much more. However, whilst businesses in the sector were bracing up for good times towards the end of 2021, then came the turbulent wind of economic instability, affecting businesses in the hotel, restaurant, and event sectors. Joining us to speak on the economic impact on the hospitality industry is E.D. Celsius, hospitality GM at Victoria Crown Plaza Hotel, Brian F. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's been a pretty chaotic last 2 years. First of all, with COVID-19, I saw how that affected, hospitality generally across the continent and across the world. But of course, right after that, we're talking about economic challenges. How is the hospitality industry currently coping with these challenges that have basically existed in the last 2 years?
Yes, incidentally, the recovery for the industry in Nigeria seems quite encouraging when you compare to other parts of Africa. In the last STR report, Nigeria, in terms of in Nigeria, particularly Abuja and Lagos, rank highest in Africa with regards to revenue and number of rooms sold within the last 6 months as compared to 2014. As compared to 2021. So in Nigeria, right now, they pick up, the recovery came up quite strongly against Egypt, which is another hub for tourism and hospitality. But again, this was impacted negatively by the increase in cost of power. Diesel went up, and this cost could not be transferred to the end user. So the operators had to, bear the brunt of the cost of production, which also led to a lot of job losses and salary cuts because someone has to bear the burden. And also, within the industry as well, there is also recently, in the past 2 months, a major negative impact given to the rise in foreign exchange and, of course, the market itself due to the economy. Purchasing power has been reduced. The economy itself is challenging, and people are not willing to spend a lot when they travel. So people are more and more resorting to having spend their times in friends and family houses, cohabitations, Airbnb, and all of that. So that poses a very strong challenge to the industry at the moment.
Now, Brian, let's also talk about the effect of the foreign exchange challenges that Nigeria is facing currently, which is technically affecting every industry at hand. Now, what are the impacts of the foreign exchange challenges in Nigeria on hotel businesses?
Basically, cost of production has been greatly affected. And just a couple of days ago, one of the biggest booking channel, Booking.com, sent an email to all the hotels in Nigeria telling them they can no longer collect their commission in local currency. That means we need to collect local currency in terms of revenue and then pay them commission in foreign currency. So this already is causing some disruption within the industry, with most of general managers commenting and looking at the way out. And don't also forget that this also impacts on food costs. Food costs for our restaurants and cost of meals has also increased. And this cost, you can no longer transfer this kind of cost to the end user, who is also not willing to spend more than what he has been spending, and whose purchasing power is also reduced. So by and large, and as you look at especially hotels in Lagos and in VI, you see that most of their clients are foreign clients, which also impact on the input with regards to getting foreign products as input for food production. And also looking at quality of other materials we use, which are mostly imported. And this has also greatly reduced the bottom line for the business. So right now, in terms of return on investment, this has seriously been degraded and affected. And most of the operators right now most of the investors are right now considering a shutdown. And some of the hotels on the pipeline, over 4,000 rooms, that we expected to be joining the inventory of hotels in Nigeria around 2023, has also been impacted, and which is also as a result of increase in exchange rate, which has recently been introduced by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So these are all the issues that has come up in recent times and impacting not just the hospitality industry, but more importantly, even travel agents are not even able to book most of their travels within and outside of Nigeria. So there's a serious impact on the foreign exchange business here currently, how it affects our business.
Tourism, definitely did take a huge hit in the last 2 years. But I also want to talk more about hotels. It must be heartbreaking to see some of these hotels, either shut down, close down business, or, see that their services become very, very poor because they can't keep up with, how expensive it is. But I want to, ask if you predict that more and more will close down, and what's been the effect of the Airbnb services? Has that also affected, or are those also suffering?
Okay, shortly after the pandemic, when they were open, we opened up the hotels. One thing about the hospitality industry is that the light must go on. The light must remain, on all the time, because the cost of restarting the hotel after you put up the light is quite expensive. So after the pandemic, a lot of hotels shut down because they couldn't reopen the hotels. They couldn't bring back most of their rooms, and cost of investments for renovations and jump-starting the hotels become very expensive, which has led to a lot of hotels currently, as we speak, is up for sale or lease. And as a consultant in the industry, we've had a lot of, a number of hotels that have been brought to us to place in the market. Now going forward, and in the build-up to the election for next year, which is, actually always unpredictable in Nigeria, we are also predicting or foreseeing a situation where most of, like I mentioned in my in the last question, most of the hotels, that are supposed to join in the inventory will not be able to come up because funding has greatly been impacted. And we are currently advising investors against getting foreign exchange. Getting funding from abroad, which will be impacted by the volatility in the foreign exchange market. But we are also looking at a situation where in the coming year, we are most likely to see a lot more hotels come up into the market for lease, close down, shut down because of high cost of maintenance. And if the cost of power increase more than what we have now at about 770 in cost of diesel, it might really become very impossible to give quality service to customers. And for some of the hotels around the high-end area might also be impacted by this, which will lead to a lot of job losses and closure of some part of the hotels and impacting services as well.
Well, I don't know much about the hotel business, but just a quick one in 30 seconds. Will reduction in hotel rates and room rates, will that maybe improve on your business?
It's neither here nor there because the wish of every hotel operator is to increase rates at this moment, because already sustaining the rates that is currently in the markets cannot also sustain operations. So you are looking at a situation where your gross operating profit has reduced to almost about 5% and might be impacted further to about 2 or 1% in the coming year if the economic conditions and the exchange rate situation keep rising at the moment. But again, the consideration of lower rates is not even in the radar at the moment. In most of our conversation with other general managers across all brands and in Nigeria in particular, so there is no possibility of a reduction in rate at the moment, because doing that means that you are just reducing your revenue while the cost of production keep increasing. And then you talked about the Airbnb. The Airbnb, yes, became very popular in Nigeria around, around the pandemic area when most of the hotels were closed. And as I said in other fora, this is not a big challenge to the hospitality industry, because like I mentioned a couple of months ago, that this industry was going to fade out in terms of this segment. It's going to fade out most quickly. And I was also an operator in this segment, and I can tell you that at the moment, the market share for Airbnb has reduced since the hotels opened up. And that's why you can see that in the STR report, the hotels in Lagos and Abuja came up strongly against other African hotels.
All right, Executive Director, Celsius Hospitality and General Manager, Victoria Crown Plaza Hotel, Brian Effa, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for shedding more light on the hospitality industry.